Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is Dr. Harold McGee. Dr. Harold McGee is a professor at Stanford University and world-renowned author on the topic of science and the chemistry of food and cooking. He has spent more than 4 decades researching and writing about this topic. His work is unique because it at once teaches us about why foods taste the way they do, as well as how to make essentially any food or drink taste better. I, like presumably most of you, absolutely love to eat. And for me, that's an understatement. I love food and eating. Today, Harold teaches us about everything from how certain types of cookware, the bowls, the pans you use, even the utensils you use, can change the taste of those foods, as well as simple things like adding a pinch of salt to anything bitter tasting, including coffee, yes, coffee, changes its chemistry and flavor for the better, and he explains why. We discuss the preparation of meat and this thing that we call savoriness, or the umami taste, and how it's brought about by heating proteins in very specific ways, and how you can bring out more of those flavors, and how to get more of the healthy compounds such as polyphenols found in chocolate and cacao. And we cover the much debated issue of whether more expensive wines are truly better than less expensive ones in terms of their taste, or whether it's all a function of marketing. So if you're a seasoned cook, or perhaps you only know how to make a few basic dishes, or if your version of cooking is basically a protein shake and some oatmeal, this discussion with Harold McGee will let you understand the essential chemistry of food and cooking and how to prepare food that is far more enjoyable. As I said before, I love to eat, and this discussion taught me how to make the foods I love so much, meat, cheese, vegetables, fruit, starches, etc., all taste far better. And since eating is a big part of life, not just a way to support our health, I'm certain that everyone will glean useful knowledge and practical tools from Dr. McGee. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, today's episode does include sponsors. And now for my discussion with Dr. Harold McGee. Dr. Harold McGee, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Huberman.
I, like most people, love to eat. I also love food. I love the look of it. I love the smell of it. I love the anticipation of eating. And you've had a truly unique career. We'll talk a little bit more about your background later, but you've had such a unique career focusing on the chemistry of food, food interactions, and I must say, even just knowing a little bit about your work, you've changed the way that I think about even like the sorts of metals that I might use to prepare my food, because it turns out these things are all impacting one another in not just small ways, but really profound ways that impact our experience of food and taste. So just to kick things off, is there any one wild food interaction chemistry fact that you just particularly find interesting?
When I started writing my book about the chemistry of cooking, I didn't know that much about cooking or about chemistry. I was kind of learning on the fly, which was part of the fun. And I read when I was writing about eggs that if you're going to make a foam of egg whites to make a meringue or a souffle, so you put the egg whites in a bowl and you whisk them until they essentially form a solid from that liquid. A solid consisting of air bubbles trapped in the liquid, and that makes it act like a solid. Amazing kind of transformation. And when I was looking at what cooks had said about this process, they said you should use a copper bowl to do that whipping. And so I looked in the chemistry of eggs literature, of which there was a fair amount actually, for some kind of explanation as to why that might be the case, and couldn't find one. And so I decided, well, it's probably an old cook's tale, somebody who had a copper bowl and used that and thought that was better. And so I didn't think anything more about it until I was preparing my book for publication, looking for cheap illustrations because I couldn't afford good ones. And I found an old engraving of an 18th century French kitchen. And there was a boy acting as though he was whipping something in a bowl, and the bowl kind of looked like our modern copper bowls with a little ring to hang the bowl on the wall. And there was a key that came along with the illustrations, and the key actually said, whipping eggs in a copper bowl to make pastries. So I thought, if the French have been doing it for hundreds of years, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should actually test it, which was a really important lesson for me. Test everything. I gulped and bought a copper bowl because they're expensive, and did a side by side, and the difference was tremendous. Different color, different texture, different consistency in the mouth, totally different experience. And so it was that realization that a cook's, what I thought might be an old cook's tale, could actually have a kernel of scientific chemical truth to it. That to me was a mind-blowing and career-changing experience, because from then on, I didn't take anything for granted. I always had to give it a try.
I love it. I recently started drinking water out of a copper reusable bottle, mostly because I needed a water bottle and there was one for sale where I happened to be, and it was copper, and I rather like the taste. There are all sorts of theories about copper being better for us health-wise, et cetera. I haven't explored those to see if they're actually true or if it's nonsense, but I do like the look of it. Is copper used for the preparation of any other foods, specifically in order to extract the best flavor from those foods or liquids?
Copper is actually used in jam making, jelly and jam making. And the reason for that is that if you use any other material, you end up messing with actually almost everything in there, because the temperatures are pretty high. They're above the boiling point. But in particular, the sugars. And if you break sucrose down to glucose and fructose, then the behavior of the material changes a lot, not necessarily for the better. And it turns out that copper actually inhibits the breakdown of sucrose into glucose and fructose. And so, again, for generations, cooks, French cooks in particular, have used copper bowls to make their preserves.
Wow. Copper is used for a variety of things, it sounds like, and people have arrived to this through what sounds like kind of an unconscious genius combined with experimentation.
When scientists got interested in cooking, they sometimes made claims and suggested changes that in fact were terrible ideas. The traditional way of doing things was actually much better. They had come up with a partial understanding of what was going on, and on the basis of that partial understanding, decided that they needed to correct cooks, who, of course, weren't as smart as they were, and get them to change. And so you can see in the middle of the 19th century, some cookbooks published in England and the U.S. having a subtitle, back in the day, long subtitles were enjoyed, and so the subtitle would be, "In which the theories of Dr. Liebig have been as much as possible applied in the recipes." And Liebig was a genius biochemist, but on cooking he kind of took his genius for granted and was wrong. The cooks knew better.
Yeah, I love this notion of unconscious genius, that a field of people who are experimenting without any formal, rigorous coursework in a given area, like chemistry, can arrive at truths without understanding the mechanistic basis of those truths. Actually, I think a lot of what we face nowadays in the sphere of health and nutrition is about that conflict. There are papers identifying mechanisms, but then they don't play out in clinical trials, which is and then there are people in the real world who are doing things for which there's really no peer-reviewed research, but you get the sense that maybe they're onto something, So it's a very interesting intersection of expertise and real world results.
Yes.
Yeah, or sometimes collision of the two. I'd like to take a quick break and acknowledge our sponsor, 8 Sleep. 8 Sleep makes smart mattress covers with cooling, heating, and sleep tracking capacity. One of the best ways to ensure a great night's sleep is to make sure that the temperature of your sleeping environment is correct. And that's because in order to fall and stay deeply asleep, your body temperature actually has to drop by about 1 to 3 degrees. And in order to wake up feeling refreshed and energized, your body temperature actually has to increase by about 1 to 3 degrees. 8 Sleep automatically regulates the temperature of your bed throughout the night according to your unique needs. 8 Sleep has just launched their latest model, the Pod 5, and the Pod 5 has several new important features. One of these new features is called Autopilot. Autopilot is an AI engine that learns your sleep patterns to adjust the temperature of your sleeping environment across different sleep stages. It also elevates your head if you're snoring, and it makes other shifts to optimize your sleep. The base on the Pod 5 also has an integrated speaker that syncs to the 8 Sleep app and can play audio to support relaxation and recovery. The audio catalog includes several NSDR, non-sleep deep rest scripts, that I worked on with 8 Sleep to record. If you're not familiar, NSDR involves listening to an audio script that walks you through a deep body relaxation combined with some very simple breathing exercises. NSDR can help offset some of the negative effects of slight sleep deprivation, and NSDR gets you better at falling back asleep should you wake up in the middle of the night. It's an extremely powerful tool that anyone can benefit from the first time and every time. If you'd like to try 8 Sleep, go to 8sleep.com/Huberman to get up to $350 off the new Pod 5. 8 Sleep ships to many countries worldwide, including Mexico and the UAE. Again, that's 8sleep.com/Huberman to save up to $350. Today's episode is also brought to us by Our Place. Our Place makes my favorite pots, pans, and other cookware. Surprisingly, toxic compounds such as PFASs or forever chemicals are still found in 80% of nonstick pans, as well as utensils, appliances, and countless other kitchen products. As I've discussed before on this podcast, these PFASs or forever chemicals like Teflon have been linked to major health issues such as hormone disruption, gut microbiome disruption, fertility issues, and many other health problems. So it's really important to try and avoid them. This is why I'm a huge fan of Our Place. Our Place products are made with the highest quality materials and are all completely PFAS and toxin-free. I especially love their Titanium Always Pan Pro. It's the first nonstick pan made with zero chemicals and zero coating. Instead, it uses pure titanium. This means it has no harmful forever chemicals and does not degrade or lose its nonstick effect over time. It's also beautiful to look at. I cook eggs in my Titanium Always Pan Pro almost every morning. The design allows for the eggs to cook perfectly without sticking to the pan. I also cook burgers and steaks in it, and it puts a really nice sear on the meat. But again, nothing sticks to it, so it's really easy to clean, and it's even dishwasher safe. I love it, and I basically use it constantly. Our Place now has a full line of Titanium Pro cookware that uses its first-of-its-kind titanium nonstick technology. So if you're looking for non-toxic, long-lasting pots and pans, go to FromOurPlace.com/Huberman and use the code Huberman at checkout. Right now, Our Place is having their biggest sale of the season. You can get up to 30% off all products now through May 12th, 2025. With a 100-day risk-free trial, free shipping, and free returns, you can try Our Place with zero risk and see why more than 1 million people have made the switch to Our Place kitchenware. Again, that's FromOurPlace.com/Huberman to get up to 30% off. As I mentioned before, I love to eat, and we could talk about any of the different major food groups as an exploration of the chemistry of food. But I think one of the more interesting ones is the combination of heat and food, right? Mm-hmm. And very often people will ask me, like, is microwaving safe and things like that? And I've didn't ask me anything recently where I said, yes, indeed, microwaves are safe. You probably don't want to stand right in front of it in case the mesh protector isn't as effective as it might be. But yeah, it's heating things up from the inside. But we have all these different ways to heat up food. And we have ways to heat food and then cool food as a way to enhance the flavor of food. When it comes to the use of heat in food, what do we know about the history of the use of, I imagine it was fire first, but this is a vast topic, but what are some of the interesting ways in which heat interacts with food at the chemical level to allow us to enjoy that food more?
Yeah, so in the anthropological literature, of course, the focus is on increasing caloric intake and being able to consume materials that we wouldn't otherwise be able to consume as efficiently. So that's the sort of practical side. But my feeling is that the use of fire wouldn't have caught on if it didn't make foods delicious, more delicious than they'd been in the first place at the same time. And in fact, probably people early on learned to associate particular sensory experiences with the nutritional value of what it was they were eating, and maybe even the safety. Because, if you kill a mammoth, you've got a lot of leftovers, and what do you do with them so that they don't spoil and make you sick later on? So the terrific thing about the application of heat to foods in general is that heat kind of takes the materials of which the food is made and rearranges them, and in many cases breaks molecules down into smaller molecules that we can actually detect with our senses of taste and smell. So proteins, carbohydrates, fats, that's what we think of as constituting food, but they're all macromolecules. They're way too big for us to experience directly. And so one of the things about cooking that's most important is that cooking will take those macromolecules and break down enough of them to produce small molecules that we can detect with our senses of taste and smell, and enjoy simply for that reason. We have my feeling is that we have our senses for them to be stimulated, and so in many cases, even if the stimulation is borderline pleasurable or maybe even slightly unpleasurable, we still enjoy the fact that we're being stimulated, that something is going on with our senses of taste and smell. And cooking does that in spades. It takes these molecules with no taste or smell and turns them into bouquets of various kinds depending on the original material.
Yeah, when I think about a piece of steak, and if I were to take a bite of it raw, it would taste very different cold versus room temperature. And then raw steak, which to me is not appetizing, cooked even just a bit, especially if it were seared on the outside, now becomes pretty darn good. Cooked it a little bit more, like medium rare, with a really nice sear on the outside. I think they call it Pittsburgh char. Anyone that likes the outside of the steak really nice and charred, and the inside rare, it's Pittsburgh char, if the chef knows what they're doing, is absolutely delicious. So what's happening there? I mean, you said that heat changes the molecular structure, but what about those changes allow us to taste it more, not just differently? Because as you said, like raw steak is pretty bland. I mean, most of us probably think of that as kind of gross, but it's also kind of bland compared to when it's cooked. What's happening? What's being released into the steak?
Yeah. So what happens is that the materials of the tissue, and in the case of meat, it's mostly protein and fat, those macromolecules, large molecules that are too big for our senses to register, get broken apart. And that's because heat is energy. Energy agitates things. It agitates molecules at the surface of the food enough to break them apart into much, much smaller pieces. And it's those pieces that we're experiencing when we take a bite. The pieces are not only much smaller, but they're also reactive, so that they can react with each other, they can react with oxygen in the air surrounding the food. And so we end up with if you did an analysis of the aroma coming off of some steak tartare and coming off of a Pittsburgh char, you're going to have very, very little noticeable, even with instrumentation, but off of the steak, a tremendous amount of volatile molecules, which are the ones that our noses detect. And then also molecules that are small enough to stimulate our taste receptors. So we have a handful, and we think of them as responding to sweet, sour, salt, bitter, umami tastes. We encounter those tastes in all kinds of things in everyday life, but when you cook a piece of meat to a high temperature and do a good amount of damage to that outer molecular surface, you generate molecules that can stimulate those receptors, even though they themselves are not sugars or salts or whatever. What I like to think of is just the alchemy of heat. You take this material, you add energy, and you transform it in ways that are delightful to us.
So if I understand correctly, even though the molecules in meat typically wouldn't stimulate the sweet receptor, when you cook steak, it starts to stimulate the sweet receptors because of the change in those molecules. You've reduced their size and you've changed their configuration, depending on which recipe you use.
Yes, and you're also generating where once you might have had, these days, our enumeration of molecules has gotten so good that who knows exactly how many are in that raw piece of meat. But whatever that number is, it's multiplied many-fold by the application of heat, simply because it's taking those materials, breaking them apart, getting them to react with each other. And the result is just an explosion of sensory information that simply wasn't there before.
We have to talk about umami. I mean, not just because the name is fun to say, but this receptor that seems to bind molecules that give us the sensation, at least in part, of savoriness. I mean, to me, few things are as delicious as the braise that comes off of meat in a cast iron pan. Mm-hmm. That I would literally scrape that stuff up onto the spatula and eat it if no one's looking. And anyone that thinks that sounds gross, I mean, it is absolutely delicious. I mean, it is like the pinnacle of like why we eat protein. That's why it feels so darn delicious to me. And the intensity of flavor per unit of whatever that stuff is so high. But then here's the thing. If you were to wait 2 hours and come back and pick up one of those little black, crumbs of braise and put it in your mouth, it kind of like punch you in the mouth. And it tastes like kind of awful, like you were licking the grill of a barbecue from 2 days before. Not good. So what's going on with braise and with umami? And we could talk about a lot of non-meat ways to stimulate umami, but such an interesting aspect of food and taste.
Yeah, it is. And something that when I started writing about cooking in the 70s, no one believed it existed except for the Japanese scientists who were living in the country where it was discovered in the first place.
That's right. They were the first to molecularly clone the umami receptor, as far as I know. Yeah.
And they were also the first to claim that there was a taste sensation that was not sweet, sour, salt, or bitter, which is why they were disbelieved in the West for decades and decades. And when as I say, when I started writing, that was the standard view. Japanese have this weird idea of something, a basic taste, that's just simply not correct. And I went to a couple of meetings in Boston and remembered this being debated among chemists. First, I'll just say that I know exactly what you mean about that flavor of something that you apparently feel guilty about enjoying, because you said you would scrape it up when no one was looking. When I was growing up, we have a family of 4 children. My mother would occasionally make an oven-baked chicken, cut up into pieces, and the drippings would drip down to the pan and brown. And after the meal, my siblings and I would line up for a spoonful of the scrapings.
Delicious. I can smell it and taste it just a bit. Yeah, anyone that's cringing at that, you have not tasted proper braise from meat. It's assuming you consume animal proteins, it is absolutely delicious.
Yeah. I can.
Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is Dr. Harold McGee. Dr. Harold McGee is a professor at Stanford University and world-renowned author on the topic of science and the chemistry of food and cooking. He has spent more than 4 decades researching and writing about this topic. His work is unique because it at once teaches us about why foods taste the way they do, as well as how to make essentially any food or drink taste better. I, like presumably most of you, absolutely love to eat. And for me, that's an understatement. I love food and eating. Today, Harold teaches us about everything from how certain types of cookware, the bowls, the pans you use, even the utensils you use, can change the taste of those foods, as well as simple things like adding a pinch of salt to anything bitter tasting, including coffee, yes, coffee, changes its chemistry and flavor for the better, and he explains why. We discuss the preparation of meat and this thing that we call savoriness, or the umami taste, and how it's brought about by heating proteins in very specific ways, and how you can bring out more of those flavors, and how to get more of the healthy compounds such as polyphenols found in chocolate and cacao. And we cover the much debated issue of whether more expensive wines are truly better than less expensive.